This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I'm actually using their awesome service to make my own website, so stick around until the end to hear more. So, there is a lot I want to say about Bojack Horseman Season 6, and honestly, it will probably take me multiple videos to do it. But before that happens, I need to jump back to a time long past. 1948. This is the year when most critics, creators, and consumers generally agree that television entered its golden age. Entertainment like Kraft Television Theater and Westinghouse Studio One captured people, ushering in what is known as high culture television, which focused on long-form drama that gripped audiences with hour-long anthologies, a form of entertainment that presented a different story and set of characters with each installment. High culture television continued its surge into the 1950s as well, sparking massive interest in what television's formatted storytelling could offer. As an exciting young medium, television introduced a number of innovative broadcasts, such as the first telecasts of Walt Disney Productions and MGM's immortal adventure romp, The Wizard of Oz. Even James Bond received its first screen adaptation in the golden age of the 50s. But as time progressed and television started reaching wider, more rural audiences, viewing habits began to change. No longer were the majority of people interested in hour-long anthology entries and complex narratives. It wasn't that those styles became inherently disliked, but instead that audiences became more hungry for short-form entertainment like I Love Lucy or Gunsmoke. These were the types of shows where the characters reoccurred from episode to episode, where the premise was consistent and familiar, and where the morals and lessons, when present, were easily digestible. The public very much still wanted quality television that they could be engaged in and learn from. They just wanted it formatted and presented in a different way. All of this is to say that the landscape of what visual storytelling was in the golden age changed. And by definition, this meant that the storytellers would have to confront this change as well. The writers at the time were faced with a conundrum. High culture television was tried, true, and tested, standing as the bedrock of what allowed television to become so pervasive throughout America. However, preferences for what an ever-growing audience wanted out of television were undeniably transforming too. The writers of high culture programming had a choice. They could try their hand at adapting their narratives to meet the short-form demands of the new landscape of storytelling, or they could continue creating long-form, loosely episodic television content that had originally brought them success, and bank on the idea that the viewing audience would remain accepting of it. The choice was change or stay the same, adapt or double down. The writers chose to double down, and frankly, their gamble didn't pay off. Former president of CBS James Aubrey has said, "We made an effort to continue purposeful drama on TV, but we found that the people just don't want an anthology. They would rather tune in on Lucy." As the baby boomers were beginning to come of age, the nation moved away from traditional high culture programming. Television veered from impactful, culturally relevant storytelling to what Newton Minow called a vast wasteland. High culture writers' failure to properly adapt to the new landscape left them without an audience, and because of it, the golden age of television came to an end. That is, until the turn of the century, where television managed to explode back onto the scene with deep, meaningful programs, prompting many to call the current era the second golden age. Television once again moved towards a place of cultural commentary and attunement, providing stories of real weight and circumstances for the audience. But things were different this time. Specifically, they were better. Because of the explosion of technology that occurred at the end of the 20th century, this second golden age of television could provide something that the first golden age couldn't even dream of. Something for everyone. Narcos, Boondocks, Doctor Who, Avatar, The Sopranos, South Park, The Wire, Adventure Time, The Walking Dead, Gravity Falls, Orange is the New Black, Rick and Morty, Downton Abbey, Bob's Burgers, The Office, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and 100 others. No matter who you were, no matter what your background was or what you did every day, there was an excellent television show just waiting somewhere for you. All you had to do as a viewer was find it. And Bojack Horseman, ever since its second season, and some could even argue its first, has been consistently near the top of what this second golden age of television has to offer. From its utterly stockpiled cast, gorgeous animation, incredible premise, laugh-out-loud jokes, and a seemingly endless stream of gripping, breath-stealing storytelling, Bojack Horseman has really exemplified what Golden Age television is supposed to be about. And then it got cancelled. And as far as we know right now from the available information, the cancellation was not through any fault of the show or its creators. Bojack simply has the luck and the misfortune of existing in the double-edged golden age of television. Because of the number of shows that exist in the current era, shows have to fight for their lives every season. The same circumstance that allowed a show like Bojack Horseman to be given a chance to succeed in the first place was also the reason that it needed to come to an end. There was only so much time in the day and so much money to go around, meaning production companies and streaming services are always in a constant race to strike the iron while it's hot and capitalize on new potential shows. The second golden age moves at a breakneck pace, and it has no conscience and takes no prisoners. The CEO of Netflix just a few years ago declared Bojack Horseman as his favorite show and even wore the show's merch around. And yet, the show was still cancelled by Netflix. And yes, make no mistake about it, the show was most certainly cancelled. Show creator Raphael Bob Waxberg has said that he wanted and planned for the show to go for at least a few more years. Netflix, on the other hand, had different ideas and told him that season 6 would be the show's last. Waxberg has said, "Yeah, I thought we'd go a couple more years, but you know, it's a business. They've got to do what's right for them, and 6 years is a very healthy run for a TV show." Netflix most certainly pulled the plug, but even with this unfortunate circumstance, there is a silver lining. Bojack Horseman now has the opportunity to solidify itself as one of the best shows of the second golden age, and it can do that by ending, and ending well. The show's creative team set the stage for a strong, competent conclusion to the narrative. And honestly, that has become a rarity in this golden age, even among the best entertainment choices. There is no doubt that many shows have absolutely amazing individual seasons. Game of Thrones Season 4 is amazing, House of Cards Season 2 is captivating, Lost Season 1 is a critical and fan favorite. However, rarely do shows maintain greatness from beginning to end. At the very pinnacle of entertainment are those select few shows that knew what they were doing in every moment, beginning, middle, and end. And this is where Bojack Horseman's writing team differs from their predecessors that created high culture programming. Where the writers of the first golden age failed to adapt to the narrative landscape that changed under their feet, Bojack's writers made adaptation a focus of their creative process. Through a deep understanding of the current narrative landscape and their own narrative, the team essentially made the show golden-proof, immune to the volatile, ever-changing nature of television interests. And even though it took me a while to get here, that's what I want to focus on in this video. Being flexible and adaptive as a writer, because it is extremely important and criminally underrated. Writing at its core is subjective self-expression, as all art is, and the best thing about that expression is that it could take a plethora of forms, from poetry to speeches to short stories. But no matter which form the writing takes, it exists as a piece of its creator. It's their thoughts and emotions and outlooks given physical form. In a very real way, when a person writes creatively, they are putting themselves on the page, making the hidden parts of their mind plain for all to see. And that is why adaptive writing is so difficult. It is a mindset that constantly forces yourself to admit that the you on the page needs to change, that the you on the page could be better, that the you on the page is not as good as it could truly be. And these sentiments are harsh enough when they come from yourself. They become even harsher when received from others. As an editor, that is basically my entire job. My livelihood relies on people adapting their writing based on the praise and criticism that I provide them.
I feel like, we should start our stories where they begin, not start them where they get interested.
But what you're probably asking yourself right now is, why is adapting as a writer so important? Well, let me tell you a story that might clear things up. Once upon a time, in the ancient days of 2014, a young man named Raphael Bob Waxberg, who I will just shorten to Wax from now on, was finishing up his script for the first season of an unknown show called Bojack Horseman. When he wrote the finale to the script, he saw best to make it somewhat definitive, wrapping up the loose ends of the narrative and giving closure to the characters' journeys. Wax's purest version of Bojack's story was one that ended rather early and completely. However, Netflix, who was set to stream this yet-to-be-known show, wanted something different. They told Wax that instead of such a cut-and-dry ending, the finale of the show should leave room for a season 2. Now, as you could imagine, this was phenomenal news. What writer doesn't want to be told that more of their work is wanted? But at the same time, Netflix's recommendation was probably also terrifying. Wax had already created his ideal scenario for Bojack and its ending. The narrative and its component parts were built around the climax and conclusion that he had in mind. Now, Netflix wanted the show's season 1 to end on a note that left the door open for season 2. But by definition, that would mean season 1's narrative would be left incomplete. And Wax knew that there was no guarantee a second season would even be possible. Shows like Freaks and Geeks and Firefly, overwhelming critical successes, were cancelled after one season. Wax has said, "A lot of things on Netflix don't get second seasons. I think it's a very busy landscape. It's hard to make an impression." Wax was at a crossroads, and he did the best possible thing that a writer could do in that situation. He adapted. Instead of being stubborn and keeping his first draft, or completely blowing up his narrative for season 2's sake, he became flexible enough to accommodate both sides. Wax has said, "Ever since then, every season, I tried to wrap up the stories in the finale while also setting up some threads to be explored later. It was a commitment to the best of both worlds." Bojack Horseman became a show that, from its very start, strived to create a storytelling experience where each season could stand alone as its own complete narrative, but while also keeping the possibilities open for a continuation of the story. Wax understood that his production studio, his audience, and even himself could be totally different at any point in the future, and therefore didn't want to lock Bojack's narrative on something that might not be applicable or accepted. And this adaptive mindset eventually became a necessity, as Wax was never certain of the future of the show, and therefore didn't plan out his plot lines any further than the current season. He has said, I think every season I was working on, I thought, this is kind of where I might go. But I never wanted to decide too early because I didn't know how many seasons I would be going for, and I didn't want to lock myself into an ending that then years later was no longer relevant or didn't make sense. Wax has also said, "Because I was doing this, I asked Netflix a few years ago, look, do me a favor. If you ever think I should not do that, if you think maybe we've reached the end of the road, just give me a heads up." They didn't have to do that, obviously, but I said I would appreciate it if I could have the forewarning to give the show a proper finale, and not set up some cliffhangers that will never pay off. Raphael Bob Waxberg had no choice but to become a flexible, adaptive writer because the Bojack Horseman show itself was uncertain. He couldn't reliably plan years ahead for the show's events and narrative, so he didn't even try. Instead, he made every season of Bojack as singularly excellent as possible, always watching, waiting, and ready for the day the show would need to end. And that is why Bojack really could stand head and shoulders above the rest of modern television of the second golden age. Its aim for an excellent end was never dependent on its future, but on its present. House of Cards Season 6 burned alive because the show could not adapt to the real-life fallout of Kevin Spacey. Penny Dreadful Season 3 descended into utter chaos because it had not set the groundwork to adapt to its cancellation. And I've already said my piece on this embarrassment.
Well, Danny kind of forgot.
But don't get me wrong, there is nothing inherently flawed with storytelling that spans multiple seasons, movies, books, or years. However, that long-term storytelling must be balanced by an adaptive mindset that can flex with the rigors of the creative process. The Bojack team had always written in 12-episode seasons, but when the show was cancelled, they realized that they couldn't tell the story that they wanted to in that time frame, and they adapted to try something completely new. 2 8-episode seasons. And again, the show being cancelled is probably much more of a blessing than a curse. We as fans do not need to be up in arms about having our Bojack taken away from us. If anything, we should be excited that we finally get the chance for Bojack to solidify itself as one of the best shows around by having a thought-out, meaningful conclusion. Wax has said, "I want to be very clear that this is an ending. This is a final season. We are building toward an ending. There's nothing more to do. I feel very good about the show that we have made, and I think fans should be excited as well. There is no injustice that needs to be righted as far as I'm concerned, as far as Bojack Horseman is concerned." And the beauty of season 6, at least this first part of it, is that it is a televised representation of adaptation. All of our major characters came to a serious realization about themselves and are faced with adapting to lives that have significantly changed. These first 8 episodes act as a build-up to a finale that is poised to challenge these characters with conflicts that they have never faced. Ultimately, the final part of season 6 is shaping up to be an investigation into whether or not the characters can become flexible enough to adapt to and overcome their hardships, or stagnate into continued dysfunction. Bojack Horseman, I believe, is making the absolute best of a bad situation, not by fixating on where it's been or what has made it great, but by focusing with an open mind on where it currently is and how it might progress forward. Adaptation as a writer is simply the skill to change and grow. It is learning to bend in the right ways so that you do not break. And ironically, gold is the most malleable, flexible element on Earth. It seems only fitting then that a show like Bojack Horseman might stand atop this current golden age. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. It really means a lot. It also means a lot that Squarespace has chosen to sponsor this video. If you have ever been intimidated by the idea of making a website or thought it wasn't for you, well, join the club, because that was me. Luckily, Squarespace is around to make the whole process seamless and easy. If you've ever played a video game more complicated than Tetris, you can use Squarespace. With the click and drag of a mouse, you can create awesome photo galleries, video backgrounds, playable videos, and more on a clean website page. As I said before, I am using Squarespace to make my own website for the channel, and it really has been the easiest thing ever. I will let you guys know more about it when I'm closer to being done. Anyway, check out squarespace.com, and by using my personal link in the description, you can get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Again, thank you to Squarespace for partnering with the channel. Thank you all for watching. As always, it was a pleasure, and I will talk to you all again soon.